Did you know that over 70% of underground metal bands from the 1980s never made it past 2 albums? And some vanished after just 1? From the frostbitten sludge of winter to the mind-bending chaos of Watchtower, these bands left a mark and then disappeared. Here are the heavy metal bands that vanished without a trace. 1. Winter. In the cold and empty streets of late 1980s New York City, something dark and different started to grow. It wasn't just another band playing fast and loud metal. It was something slower, scarier, and more haunting. This band was called Winter. While most metal bands were speeding up their songs, Winter did the opposite. They slowed everything down so much that each note felt like it was dragging you deeper into a dark and frozen world. The band was made up of 3 members: John Allman on vocals and bass, Stephen Flamm on guitar, and Joe Goncalves on drums. In 1990, they released their album Into Darkness through Future Shock Recordings. But this wasn't just an album you listened to, it was something you felt in your bones. Every song was heavy, slow, and full of sadness. It sounded like the world was ending slowly, one crushing note at a time. Songs like Eternal Frost and the title track Into Darkness made listeners feel trapped in a world where hope had vanished. Their sound helped start a new kind of metal that was dark, slow, and heavy, what people would later call funeral doom or sludge metal. Even their album cover looked cold and empty, matching the music perfectly. At first, Into Darkness didn't make a huge splash, but over time, it quietly reached more and more metal fans, especially those who liked heavy music that made you think and feel deeply. Winter's music spread like a slow-moving fog, creeping into the hearts of people who wanted something darker than anything they had heard before. And just as quickly as they came, Winter disappeared. In 1994, they released an EP called Eternal Frost, which had more songs recorded during the same time as their album. Then, silence. No one really knew why they stopped. There wasn't a public fight or a final concert. The band just faded away, leaving fans with 1 album and 1 EP. Some people wondered if their music was just too heavy to keep making. Others thought maybe that 1 album was all they ever wanted to say. Whatever the reason, their sudden silence only made them more mysterious. For years, Winter became almost like a ghost in the metal world. People whispered about them, collected their rare records, and kept their legend alive. They weren't just a band anymore. They were a symbol of how music could be both terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Their music showed that sometimes the scariest thing isn't loud noise, but the quiet, slow feeling of nothingness. When Winter reunited briefly in the 2010s, fans were happy to see them again, but the mystery of their long silence was never fully solved. Their short time in the spotlight became one of the most powerful moments in metal history. But if Winter dragged metal into a frozen void, the next band brought it back with pure, violent firepower. 2. Demolition Hammer. As the 1980s came to an end, many metal bands were trying to stay popular. But out of the Bronx in New York City came a band that didn't care about fame. They just wanted to be the loudest, angriest band out there. That band was Demolition Hammer. Formed in 1986, they had one goal: to create the most violent, unstoppable thrash metal music ever made. In 1990, they released Tortured Existence, and it hit fans like a punch to the face. Their music mixed the fast energy of bands like Creator and Dark Angel with the tough attitude of New York hardcore. Steve Reynolds screamed and growled over booming bass lines, while James Riley and Derek Sykes played wild, razor-sharp guitar riffs. The drummer, Vinny Days, later replaced by Alex Marquez, hit the drums like he was trying to destroy them. On stage, they were like a storm, wild, loud, and impossible to ignore. 2 years later, they released Epidemic of Violence, an album even heavier and faster than the first. It's one of the most brutal thrash albums ever made. The songs were short but full of speed, blood, and rage. Skull-Fracturing Nightmare, Carnivorous Obsession, and 44 Caliber Brain Surgery are now considered classics. At that time, it seemed like Demolition Hammer could lead a new wave of extreme thrash metal. They had everything: the sound, the skill, and the fury. But then, things changed. In 1994, they released their 3rd album, Time Bomb, and fans were shocked. The band had slowed down and started to sound more like groove metal bands such as Pantera or Machine Head. Their sharp, violent thrash style was gone, replaced by slower, simpler songs. The change confused fans, and many were disappointed. Soon after, Demolition Hammer broke up without much noise. Nobody really explained why they changed their sound or why they disappeared. All that was left were two amazing albums and a lot of questions. Why would a band with such power give it all up? What made them stop? Their disappearance left fans wondering what could have been. Over time, their first two albums became treasured items for metal fans who missed that raw, pure thrash energy. Demolition Hammer's short but intense career made them legends in underground metal, and their sudden end only made their story more unforgettable. Just when thrash fans thought things couldn't get more intense, a band from Wisconsin came in with brains, speed, and complexity that few could match. 3. Realm. In the middle of America, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a place not known for heavy metal, a very different kind of band was born in the 1980s. This band was called Realm, and they stood out because they didn't just play fast, they played smart. Realm was one of the few bands that could mix the power of thrash metal with the brains of progressive rock. They created music that was both aggressive and thoughtful, full of tricky guitar solos and changing rhythms. Their first album, Endless War, came out in 1988 through Road Racer Records. Right away, it caught the attention of fans and critics. The band's singer, Mark Antoni, had a strong and clear voice that added emotion to their complex songs. Guitarists Takis Keenis and Paul Laganowski played fast, complicated riffs that amazed listeners, while bassist Steve Post and drummer Mike Olson kept the music tight and fast-moving. Songs like Slay the Oppressor and All Heads Will Turn to the Hunt showed just how talented the band was. They made music that was exciting and clever at the same time. 2 years later, Realm released their second album, which showed they were growing even more as musicians. The songs had deeper messages and better production, making every instrument sound clearer and more powerful. They proved they weren't just good players, they were good songwriters too. With these two albums, Realm became one of the best bands in technical thrash metal. Fans expected big things from them, but then, just like that, Realm was gone. After one last song, they disappeared from the metal scene with no warning. There wasn't a breakup announcement. There wasn't a final tour. They just stopped. People wondered what happened. Was it because thrash metal was losing popularity and grunge music was taking over? Did their record label give up on them? Or did the members just decide to move on with their lives? No one really knows the truth, but the silence that followed only made their story more interesting. Realm became one of metal's biggest what-ifs, a band with amazing talent that vanished too soon. Their two albums are still celebrated today by fans of smart, technical metal. They remind us of what could have been if Realm had stayed together just a little longer. Sometimes the brightest stars burn out the fastest, and Realm's story is proof of that. But across the ocean, another band was weaving dark tales of folklore and paganism into thrash metal in a way no one else dared. 4. Sabbath. Sabbath was a unique thrash metal band that came from Nottingham, England during the mid-1980s. This was a time when thrash metal was becoming hugely popular all around the world, but Sabbath didn't just copy the famous American or German bands. Instead, they carved out their own path, thanks to the sharp mind of their singer and lyricist Martin Walkier and the incredible guitar skills of Andy Sneap. Their first album, History of a Time to Come, came out in 1988 and shocked many people in the metal world. It wasn't just loud and fast, it was smart and original. They mixed aggressive thrash with old-school British metal-style melodies and complex lyrics. Walkier didn't sing about the usual metal topics. He wrote about English myths, old pagan beliefs, and deep stories from history. This made Sabbath stand out from other bands. The rest of the band was also impressive. Fraser Crasky's bass lines were strong and solid, and Simon Negus's drumming was tight and powerful. With this lineup, Sabbath had everything they needed to grow into something even bigger. In 1989, they released a second album called Dreamweaver, Reflections of Our Yesterdays. It was based on a book by Brian Bates called The Way of Weird. This album was even more ambitious than the first. It had longer songs, more complex music, and even deeper lyrics. Critics loved it, and many fans saw Sabbath as one of the smartest and most creative thrash bands in the world. They had their own sound, their own look, and a clear musical vision. But even great bands face problems. Behind the scenes, things were starting to fall apart. There were fights about money and disagreements about where the band should go next. The strong bond between Walkyier and Sneap began to break. After Dreamweaver, Walkyier left the band. He took his powerful voice and unique lyrics with him to start a new band called Skyclad, which would help create the folk metal genre. Sneap tried to keep Sabbath going with new members. They brought in a new singer, Richie Desmond, and a new bass player, Wayne Banks. In 1991, they released another album called Morning Has Broken. While it was well played, it didn't have the same heart and magic as the earlier records. Many fans didn't connect with it. Not long after, Sabbath broke up. Although Sneap later became one of the most successful producers in metal, the original Sabbath lineup was something special. They had the talent, the ideas, and the passion to change the thrash scene. But before they could fully reach their potential, it all came to an end. Still, their first two albums remain as proof of what could have been, and they continue to influence many bands even today. If Sabbath used mythology to fuel their thrash, the next band would use pure math and madness to tear it apart. 5. Watchtower. Watchtower was a band from Austin, Texas that started in the early 1980s. While Austin wasn't known for metal music, this band quickly became famous for being one of the most complex and technical metal bands ever. They started in 1982, and by 1985, they released their first album, Energetic Disassembly. It was unlike anything anyone had ever heard. The music was fast, full of strange time changes, and very hard to play. Guitarist Billy White, bassist Doug Kaiser, and drummer Rick Kolaluka were all extremely skilled. On top of that, singer Jason McMaster had a wild and high-pitched voice that added to their unique sound. This wasn't easy music to listen to. It was made for serious fans who liked to be challenged. Even though they didn't sell many records, their style deeply influenced many bands that came after them. Groups like Death, Cynic, and even Dream Theater looked up to Watchtower. Their second album, Control and Resistance, came out in 1989. It featured new members Ron Jarzombek on guitar and Alan Tecchio on vocals. The music was even more technical and harder to follow, but it also had catchy moments and strange melodies. Critics loved the album, and it looked like Watchtower was finally going to get the fame they deserved. But the band's complex music made it hard for them to stay together. They planned to make a third album called Mathematic, but things slowly fell apart in the early 1990s. The members went on to other projects. Jarzombek started a new band called Spastic Inc. Tecchio returned to his old band Hades and joined another group called Nonfiction. McMaster went in a more rock direction with a band called Dangerous Toys. Watchtower became a legend. People in the metal world would talk about them with respect, even though they didn't stay together. Over the years, they played a few shows and even released a small collection of songs in 2016 called Concepts of Math, Book 1. But they never came back in full force. Their music was just too complex for the mainstream, and they might have been ahead of their time. Watchtower is still seen today as a musician's band, a group that showed what metal could be when pushed to the extreme. From technical chaos to soaring opera, the next band brought masks, mystery, and power metal perfection. 6. Crimson Glory. Crimson Glory was a mysterious and theatrical band from Sarasota, Florida. They formed in the mid-1980s and quickly stood out because of their look and sound. Every member wore a silver mask that covered their whole face, which gave them an eerie and powerful image. In 1986, they released their first album on Roadrunner Records. It was a big surprise to many listeners. The music was progressive power metal with beautiful melodies and strong emotions. Their singer, known only as Midnight, had a soaring operatic voice that could express both strength and sadness. Guitarists John Drenning and Ben Jackson played complex and beautiful solos, while Jeff Lords on bass and Dana Burnell on drums added power and rhythm. They were often compared to Queensryche, but Crimson Glory had their own darker and more romantic style. Their second album, Transcendence, came out in 1988 and is still considered one of the best albums in American power metal. Songs like Lady of Winter, Red Sharks, and Lonely showed their range, from haunting and soft to loud and anthemic. Midnight's voice was at its best, and the whole band sounded perfect together. They even toured with some of the biggest names in metal, like Metallica and Ozzy Osbourne. It looked like they were going to become huge stars, but the good times didn't last. After touring for Transcendence, the band started to change. In 1991, they decided to take off the masks and change their sound. Their third album, Strange and Beautiful, had more of a blues and hard rock feel. While some fans liked it, many others were disappointed. They missed the old magic, the mystery, and the metal sound. Then Midnight left the band. He had personal and creative problems and didn't feel like he could continue. Crimson Glory tried to keep going with other singers and even reunited with Midnight for a short time before he passed away in 2009. But they never fully recovered the special energy of those first two albums. Crimson Glory's early work, especially Transcendence, still holds a special place in metal history. The combination of strong music, emotional singing, and mysterious stage presence made them unforgettable. Even though they didn't last, their influence is still felt, and their short but brilliant time in the spotlight remains something truly special. But before Crimson Glory could rise too high, an older force from the shadows was slowly being rediscovered, a band that was almost lost to time. 7. Pagan Altar. In the late 1970s, deep in the gritty working-class area of Brockley in South London, a mysterious and unusual band began to form. This band was Pagan Altar, started by a father and son, Terry Jones on vocals and Alan Jones on guitar. While most bands at the time were getting faster and louder, trying to keep up with the new heavy metal wave, Pagan Altar chose a different path. They created music that was slower, darker, and filled with haunting emotions. Their sound felt like it came from old legends, full of misty graveyards, strange rituals, and forgotten gods. Terry's sorrowful voice and Alan's thick bluesy guitar riffs gave their songs a timeless and eerie feeling that was unlike anything else around. Even though they recorded some powerful and memorable music in the late 70s and early 80s, songs that fans would later treasure as their first album, Volume 1, success didn't come easy. The music world wasn't ready for their slow, spooky style. They played small shows, made demo tapes, and slowly built a small but loyal fan base. But no record label took a chance on them. Their first album, recorded in 1982, never got a proper release and was instead passed around by tape traders in the underground scene. Without industry support and struggling to keep things going, Pagan Altar slowly faded away by 1985, long before most people even knew they existed. Their music was nearly forgotten, remembered only by a handful of dedicated fans. For almost 20 years, Pagan Altar was more of a rumor than a band. But in the late 1990s and early 2000s, something began to change. The internet helped fans discover their old recordings, and doom metal was becoming popular again. As people searched for the roots of this gloomy, powerful music, they found Pagan Altar. In 1998, their long-lost recordings were finally released, and fans loved them. Encouraged by this new interest, Terry and Alan Jones brought the band back together. They released new albums like Lords of Hypocrisy in 2004 and Mythical and Magical in 2006, which were praised by fans and critics alike. Sadly, Terry Jones passed away in 2015, but by then, Pagan Altar had finally earned the respect they deserved. They were no longer a hidden secret. They were legends who had shaped an entire genre. Pagan Altar carved their path through legend and fog, but the next band built theirs through battle cries and raw underground rebellion. 8. Brokus Helm. In 1982, in the heart of San Francisco, a new kind of heavy metal band was born. This band wasn't interested in following the rules or chasing fame. They were called Brokus Helm, and they were loud, proud, and completely their own thing. Led by singer and guitarist Bobby Wright, along with bassist Jim Schumacher and drummer Jack Hayes, they mixed heavy metal with fantasy stories and medieval themes. Their look and sound were like something out of an ancient battle, with homemade armor and songs that sounded like war chants. At a time when thrash and glam metal were taking over, Brokus Helm refused to follow trends. They wanted to keep heavy metal real, raw, and full of passion. Their first album, Into Battle, came out in 1984 and was filled with wild, energetic songs about heroes, swords, and struggles. But their strong vision didn't always fit with what record labels wanted. They clashed with companies over their music, their image, and even their album covers. This made it hard to keep releasing music. It took them 4 years to finish their second album, Black Death, which finally came out in 1988. Even though it had amazing songs and a bold, unique style, the album wasn't widely available. Without much support, Broca's Helm didn't get the attention they deserved, and they slowly slipped into the shadows. For many years after that, the band almost disappeared. They rarely played shows, and fans wondered if they would ever hear from them again. But Broca's Helm never officially broke up. They just moved at their own pace. In 2004, they returned with a new album called Defender of the Crown, their first in 16 years. It proved that they hadn't lost their edge or their passion. Though they've always stayed far from the spotlight, Broca's Helm built a small but devoted group of fans around the world. They're the kind of band that never gave up or sold out. They did things their way, and because of that, they became underground legends. And if you thought metal was a boys' club, the next band shattered that myth with a voice and vision that burned with unrelenting fire. 9. Hellion. Back in the loud, wild metal scene of 1980s Los Angeles, one band stood out not just for their sound, but for who was leading them. That band was Hellion, and at the front was Anne Boleyn, a fierce, talented woman who did it all. She was the singer, the leader, a songwriter, and even started her own record label. In a world where most bands were made up of men, she proved that women could lead in metal too. With her strong voice and powerful stage presence, she guided Hellion through the tough and competitive music scene. Alongside her were guitarists like Ray Schenk and Chet Thompson, who helped shape the band's sharp, fiery sound. Their music mixed classic heavy metal with speed and energy, and their songs were catchy and bold. Hellion's early recordings, like their 1983 EP and the mini-album Postcards from the Asylum in 1986, caught the attention of fans, especially in Europe, where traditional metal was still strong. They got featured in magazines and played exciting shows, earning a loyal fan base. Their 1987 album, Screams in the Night, produced by Ronnie James Dio's keyboardist Claude Schnell, was polished and full of potential. Songs like Run for Your Life made it clear they had something special. Everything seemed lined up for them to break through to the big time, but things didn't go as planned. The band went through many member changes, and long breaks made it hard to keep building their success. After another EP in 1989 that revisited earlier songs, Hellion disappeared from the spotlight for a while. Anne Boleyn brought the band back in the following years with different musicians, and they released more music and did some touring. But the magic of the original lineup and those early years was hard to recapture. Fans were left wondering what could have been if the band had stayed more stable and active during metal's biggest years. Hellion had all the pieces: the voice, the songs, and the image. But too many pauses and changes slowed them down. Still, their legacy remained strong, especially for showing that a powerful woman could lead a metal band with force and fire. But while Hellion fought in the crowded streets of LA, one band was quietly building an epic legacy in the middle of nowhere. 10. Manila Road. Back in the late 1970s, in the quiet and windy city of Wichita, Kansas, a band unlike any other was starting to take shape. This band was Manila Road, and it was created by Mark the Shark Shelton, a guitarist, singer, and songwriter with a huge imagination and love for fantasy stories. From the very beginning, Manila Road wasn't interested in copying popular bands or trying to sound like anyone else. Instead, they built their own world with songs about myths, magic, warriors, and ancient battles. Shelton's singing voice was sharp and unusual, and his guitar playing was full of twisting riffs and wild solos. Even though the band changed members over the years, with people like drummer Randy Thrasher Fox and bassist Scott Park staying for a long time, the heart of Manila Road was always Shelton and his powerful vision. Throughout the 1980s, Manila Road released several albums that became treasures for fans who loved epic heavy metal. Albums like Crystal Logic in 1983 opened the gates in 1985, The Deluge in 1986, and Mystification in 1987 showed how creative and focused they were. These records told long, wild stories full of danger, magic, and bravery, like the pages of an old sword and sorcery book turned into music. Their style was bold and full of emotion, and although it didn't appeal to everyone, it was deeply loved by their fans, especially in Europe, where their cult following grew strong. But even with such powerful albums and loyal supporters, the band never became very famous. Being from a small city and working with smaller record labels made it hard for them to get noticed by bigger audiences. After releasing their heavy and dark 1990 album, The Courts of Chaos, the band stopped. Shelton moved on to other projects, including one called The Circus Maximus, and fans were left wondering if Manila Road would ever return. For almost 10 years, Manila Road was silent. During the 1990s, heavy metal changed a lot, and the type of fantasy metal that Manila Road played became rare. It was a hard time for fans who still believed in that kind of music. It felt like Manila Road had disappeared for good, but in secret, their music was still being shared and celebrated by people who knew how special it was. These fans kept the band's name alive, passing around old albums and talking about the stories Shelton had written. Their music was like a secret treasure, known only to those who looked for it. Then something amazing happened. Around the late 1990s and early 2000s, Mark Shelton brought the band back. He was full of new ideas and ready to play again. Manila Road released several new albums and began to tour around the world, finally getting some of the attention and praise they always deserved. For many younger fans who had never seen them live, it was a dream come true. They had returned from the shadows and proved they still had power. Sadly, Shelton passed away in 2018, but by then, Manila Road had already made a huge comeback. That long period when they were gone, especially during the 1990s, will always be remembered as a sad time when the band's flame nearly went out. But they didn't stay gone forever. They returned stronger than ever, leaving behind a story filled with heart, mystery, and the kind of magic only they could create.